from KQED.
Hey everybody, from KQED Public Radio, this is Political Breakdown. I'm Scott Schaefer.
And I'm Katie Orr, in today for Marisa Lagos, who is likely on a beach drinking a margarita right about now.
That's right, B.
Or me too, or will be soon. Today on The Breakdown, he has 1.7 million followers on YouTube. His channel is called Meet Kevin, where he's best known for handing out tips on real estate and investments. Gubernatorial candidate Kevin Paffrath is joining us.
He's one of three Kevins running for governor, at least in the top tier of candidates, but this one calls himself a JFK-style Democrat. He supports the recall of Gavin Newsom, and he says if he's elected, he's got plans to solve things like the drought, homelessness, and crime. And some of those plans, he says, in his words, are a little outlandish. We're going to talk to him about all those things. But first, Katie, we have to give mention, of course, of the terrible wildfires that are continuing to burn, threatening South Lake Tahoe. You're up in Sacramento, not far from the mountains there. But what's the air quality like, first of all? And what are you hearing from people who may have, live up there or live in that direction?
In Sacramento, the air is actually, depending on the day, the past couple days, it hasn't been as bad because the wind is primarily blowing east. We have been getting some smoke, but that's been from some other fires. But aside from that, I think people are just shocked and they're sad. This is a place, as much as people in San Francisco go, people in Sacramento go up there all the time. I know people who go up there regularly. And I was just thinking today about how a place we took our daughter sledding, her first time sledding last year, it's probably all burned up. It's sad.
So sad.
It's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking. And, you see these ski resorts, which are also being threatened in some cases, using their snow machines to fight the fires. It's just bizarre. Everything's sort of upside down. Fortunately, there was a presidential declaration of emergency, so that should help get some federal funds that are much needed. But certainly we wish the best to the firefighters and everybody who's up there or fleeing there, and hope that this is out as soon as possible. Let's turn to politics. There was a poll out this week. PPIC, I'd say one of the top polls in California for sure. And on the recall question, 58% of likely voters saying they will not vote yes on the recall, 39% saying that they will support it. And Katie, that is remarkably stable. Both within the PPIC polls, which have been virtually the same for months, but it's also not that far from what the 2018 election was, with Newsom getting 62, John Cox getting 38. So, it seems like people's feelings and attitudes are kind of entrenched in some ways.
I was talking to a couple voters this week, and they were, by and large saying the same thing, like, why are we doing this? There's a regularly scheduled election in 2022 that it's costing a lot of money that we could be using on other things. So perhaps this is something we can ask our guests about, Kevin Paffrath, to see what his take is on this. But it does feel like some voters, at least ones who only casually follow the politics, kind of feel like, we don't need to do this right now.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's bring Mr. Paffrath in. We've got him, one of the replacement candidates running in the recall. Kevin Paffrath is a 29-year-old YouTuber. His channel, Meet Kevin, has 1.7 million subscribers, as we said. He talks about investing, real estate, stocks, and other things. He's also a Democrat who supports the recall. Kevin Paffrath, welcome to Political Breakdown. Good to have you.
Yes, thank you so very much for being here. Happy to run as a JFK-style moderate Democrat.
Well, what does that mean exactly in 2021?
What it means is JFK was one of the reasons he was famous, many reasons he was famous, but one of them was his New Frontier plan, which the idea was invest in the people first. Better schools, better healthcare, then lower regulation and lower taxes. And that's exactly what I believe Californians want. And that's what I stand for.
But here's a basic question. Why run for governor at all? As we mentioned, you have 1.7 million YouTube followers. You have a nice life. You have plenty of money. Why throw your hat into the ring, especially when you don't have any experience in government?
Yeah, and I totally understand the experience question. I'll answer your question as to why, but quickly, it's worth noting that my experience is pretty dang varied, from 3,000 hours in law enforcement to real estate investing, economics and political science at UCLA, and all of these things combined just give me a sense of purpose with economics and providing value to people. And that's what I do on my YouTube channel: is provide value to other people, 99% of the time, totally for free. Of course, we sell products and things like that as well, but completely for free makes me happy, providing people a service. And so one of the problems I've seen recently is that in California, we have a state where folks are paying very high taxes. They're heavily regulated. And as of recently, they've looked up and looked around to see what their government is doing, and they're seeing a lot of homelessness, unaffordable housing, the impression of a lot of crime. And so we've got these serious problems, as well as fires and drought, to where I believe the reason I'm running in my campaign is to make sure that our state doesn't go bankrupt in the next 20 years because of these problems weighing down our state. I don't want my children, who are 3 and 5 right now, when they're 23 and 25, to say, "Dad, why did you raise us here? Why didn't you move to Texas or Florida like everybody else did?"
Well, and you were born in Germany, I think, and came here as a very young boy, young infant, really. I think you were maybe 18 months old or something. What do you remember about that?
I remember nothing about Germany. The only thing I remember is in kindergarten here in America, my teacher getting very confused when she would ask me a question, and I would tell her, "I'm sorry, hold on, I'm sinking," and she was always very clear to say, "No, you're not sinking," because I still had the accent.
So do you feel like do you feel some affinity to your native country?
No,
Not at all.
Yeah, no. It's so. I mean, I go there now and I speak German, but I have such an American accent. People are like, "Oh, so where did you learn to speak German?"
They've got good beer, though.
Yeah, that is true. Although Oktoberfest has been canceled. Darn COVID ruins everything.
So, as Scott alluded to, you were born in, around 1992 or so. You've had a few elections under your belt. Can you tell us who you voted for in the 2020 presidential primary in California, assuming you voted in that?
No, I didn't vote in the primaries, but I voted for Biden.
Why didn't you vote?
I don't know. Like, really, I've been the last 10 years have just been so focused on work, and setting our base up, our family, getting our household situation orchestrated. We were just the classic apathetic millennials, which I think is a big problem. I think people should always vote. Now, I voted on propositions and presidential elections, but the primary elections, I've always sat them out previously.
What about November? The big election. You said you did, I think, vote for Biden, right?
Yep. Which is a little more unpopular now after Afghanistan, but it is what it is. I mean, I couldn't have predicted that one.
Yeah. Did you? I mean, you call yourself a JFK Democrat, and that's something Biden can relate to, I'm sure, because he was a young man when JFK was president. But how do you see? I mean, JFK was somebody who known for, to a certain extent, reaching across the aisle. I mean, some of the big legislation that he worked on and Lyndon Johnson worked on later, like the Civil Rights Act, could not have passed without Republicans. How do you see yourself, running government if you become the governor?
Well, just exactly like that. I mean, in my opinion, and this is not a slam on media, it just is what it is. I think media has a tendency to focus heavily on more polarizing candidates because it's much more exciting, right? They're more fireworks, and people tune into fireworks more. People who hate Donald Trump tune into Fox News to hear Donald Trump sometimes. And so that tends to lead to a little bit more polarizing in politics. And for me, I believe that my goal is to bring back that sense of middle normalcy. And so I want to work with both sides. I consider myself a 51-49er when it comes to Democrat versus Republican. I'm just so in the middle. I care about the overarching issues that aren't Republican or Democratic issues. They're Californian issues: fires, water, housing, schools, crime. That's what I care about. I don't want to be a career politician. If I can come in, help California get back on track, stop wasting money, stop misleading Californians like what we have now, unfortunately, with Governor Newsom, then that's a well-purposed governorship.
But, you talk about getting California back on track and that the state, is not spending its money wisely. We have a massive surplus. I mean, depending on how you look at it, between like 38 million and $70 million surplus. So, is the state really doing that poorly? We have a record amount of money in our rainy day funds. We seem to be on stable economic footing.
Yeah, well, that's exactly Governor Newsom's narrative, but I'm actually very glad you broke that down because, like you said, depending on how you look at it, half of that money came from the federal government in COVID relief funds. Then Governor Newsom went on a spending spree with stimulus for giving traffic tickets and whatever. And the LA Times reported that he actually dipped into our reserve funds by $12 billion. So what was a big surplus is now negative $12 billion, which is quite shocking. But beyond that, we've got to look at where did our half of the surplus, not the one-time COVID relief money, but where did our one half come from? And it came from a record season of IPOs and SPAC IPOs. This is very important.
What are SPAC IPOs?
Exactly. Yeah. And these SPAC IPOs, super popular in 2020, not so popular in 2021. So we have this inflection point in the markets to where we're expecting much less revenues coming in for hedge funds and larger institutional investors in 2021 for California. But unfortunately, Gavin Newsom is spending as if this sort of surplus is going to continue year after year after year. We're not going to have a 2020 financial market year after year. It hasn't even been that this year. So unfortunately, when we sort of open up the hood and look into the details of the number, we've got a problem. We're not expecting those numbers to keep coming. And when we look at the details of our population decline, we see that the people coming to California are either being born here, or they're undocumented, or they're coming for college. And the people who are leaving are businesses and families who contribute to the economy. So we're having more draws on the economy. The people contributing to the economy are leaving, at least 2.8 million of them over the last 10 years. And the big surplus, half of it was not from California, and the other half that is not sustainable. So when we look at the details, we got a big
Yeah, next year's budget definitely going to be a little bit smaller. All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we return, we're going to continue our conversation with Kevin Paffrath. He's a Democrat running for governor in the recall election. You're listening to Political Breakdown from KQED Public Radio.
Support for this podcast comes from Lucky and Lucky California, featuring Lucky You Rewards with featuring offers, coupons, and points. Good at neighborhood Lucky and Lucky California stores. Guests can sign up on the Lucky mobile app, in-store, or online at luckysupermarkets.com. Support for this podcast comes from the Mill Valley Film Festival. Experience our highly anticipated, thoughtfully curated U.S. and world cinema films October 7th through 17th. Screening in theater and online. Learn more at mvff.com.
And welcome back to Political Breakdown. I'm Scott Schaefer here with Katie Orr, and we're chatting today with someone best known for dispensing tips about real estate and investments on YouTube, where he has about 1.7 million followers, give or take a few. Kevin Paffrath is a Democrat supporting the recall of Gavin Newsom, and he's running to replace him as well. Well, you were up on the debate stage, Kevin, with two other Kevins and a John, Cox, Faulkner, Kiley, and you. And I think the bit of news I think that you made was your idea of, sticking a giant straw in the Mississippi River and creating a pipeline that would go across, I think, 4 different states and help us solve our water problems. Where did you come up with that idea?
Yeah, Big Think actually did a publication on this. Professors had gotten together, and this is an idea that had been looked into in the past as well. So this is an idea that's been floating around. Really, my intention is to broadcast that California does not have enough water. We are very, very dry. We're more dry than we've ever been before. And we got to think big. We've got to do whatever we can to make sure we have enough water. I don't really care if that means building more desal, wells, water reservoirs, or building a pipeline. Whatever the answer is, we will figure out within our 5-week transition period. And that's unfortunately what folks over at the LA Times don't seem to listen to when I tell them this. So we have a 5-week transition period to make sure we have a very, very solid scientific executable plan as soon as we get into office, because now we have all of the resources. Now the Army Corps of Engineers answers the phone and says, all right, this is going to be our best way to execute emergency action. And so I just want to make sure that everybody knows we have a water crisis, and I will stop at nothing to solve it because it's a top priority.
So you have made a lot of your money as a real estate investor. I think by one count, you and your wife own 22 different properties in the state. So a little questions about that. Are you a landlord in this? As a real estate investor, where do you come down on the eviction moratorium that we've been hearing so much about?
I don't consider myself a landlord. Technically I am, but Lauren, my wife, does all of our property management. So technically that's her job. But yeah, look, we own 22 properties. The ones, we only live in one of them. So the rest of them are rental properties. And I actually think that gives us a lot of really good perspective for understanding what we need to solve our housing crisis. And the answer is simple. We need a lot more houses. We don't need to infill our cities more. We need to build large communities outside of our cities and then connect those with proper infrastructure. But to answer your question, where do I stand on this eviction crisis that we have? Well, look, here's the thing. The reason we have this eviction crisis is because governors like Governor Newsom are failing to get rental money out to the people. The federal Congress, the United States Congress, passed $47 billion of rental relief, part of it in December of 2020 and the other part in February of 2021 with the two stimulus packages, $600 and $1,400. Of that $47 billion, only $10 billion has actually been sent to tenants. And in California, we're doing worse than that ratio. We've only distributed around 6% to tenants as of the end of July when they last did their count.
What do you think of the moratorium, though? What do you think of the moratorium as a policy?
We wouldn't need the moratorium if people had their rent relief money. People can get 1 year of back rent for free from the federal government and up to 3 months going forward. If people got that money, if we were 100% paid, you could immediately lift the eviction moratorium because you would prevent those evictions because people would be caught up. That is the number one priority for me. Yeah. Keep the eviction up to when that money is distributed, but get the money distributed already. I don't understand why it has to take 9 months to get the money out. If Nancy Pelosi sent us a stimulus check and said, you'll get it in 9 months, there'd be more riots at the Capitol.
Let me ask you a question about criminal justice. It's a big issue, and it's something that a governor, in some ways can have a big impact on, although the voters have a big say as well, as does the legislature. But how would you describe your approach to criminal justice? You and I, for example, I know we had a little exchange after the Sirhan parole recommendation came out, and you said in your message that you didn't think murderers should be paroled. And so I'm just thinking, I'm wondering, how do you think about these things?
Yeah, so let's actually start there because it's a good way to loop into how we break the cycle of crime. To break the cycle of crime, we've got to put ourselves into the shoes of somebody who's now in prison for whatever reason it is. Somebody gets out, first of all, when they're in prison, they're costing California $240,000 for 2 years. It's a lot of money. Then when they get out of prison, they have very little money. They typically have very few job opportunities because it's very difficult to get a job, let alone a career as a felon. You can't survive on minimum wage in California. And so what happens? Well, most of the time you have recidivism. That is more than, I believe the latest statistic is more than 72% of people who are released from prison end up back in prison within 3 years in California. That's horrible. That's a very bad cycle of crime. So it doesn't make sense for people to get out if they're going to go right back in. We got to fix it. How do we fix it? With schools. We need to teach people financial education and careers, and we can give that opportunity to prisoners as well.
And so coming back to the question, in terms of parole, I mean, would you reverse the Sirhan recommendation? And in general, because governors sign off, they either accept or reverse parole recommendations for lifers, people who have, are in prison with life with the possibility of parole. Like, what would your approach be?
Well, so specifically my approach on parole, I am very reluctant. I think it'd probably be a case by case, which is what you have here. But for example, the RFK killer, I would be very reluctant to allow that. I would be very likely to overturn that. I will be a tough on crime governor. I do believe that Proposition 4757 are big problems in our state. And we need a massive community policing style reform package that's negotiated with Republicans and Democrats. So there's a lot of work to do. And I think in our reform package, we can address broader specifics for the parole question that you're asking. So the overarching goal, more community policing and education, future schools, for example, and then dealing with the micro within negotiations.
Where do you come down on Democratic efforts right now to reform how law enforcement works? There's a bill working its way through the legislature that would make it easier to decertify police officers for certain crimes, for example. There's been an ongoing debate about scaling back use of force in California. And these have been hard to pass, even in a Democratic-controlled government. What is your take on those bills?
Yeah, well, all of the bills they're really like an eyedropper on a fire, and like a real fire. Like nothing happens. They don't do anything. It's the same thing as with housing. You pass a bill, you build 1,000 extra homes a year. It does nothing. We need hundreds of extra thousands of homes. It's the same thing with criminal justice reform. We need to rethink massively these small bills. Okay, an officer committed a crime. Well, maybe they should be decertified more. Look, okay, I'm all for that, but it doesn't go far enough. Because it doesn't address the broader issues that we have. We don't need to defund the police. We need to properly fund the police while making sure we're not overfunding the police, having transparency in how that money is spent, and then focus on a new style of policing, which works in many cities, community-style policing, where rather than patrolling impoverished neighborhoods at night with lights off and windows cracked, we install more lighting. We have present officers to deter crime rather than sneak up on crime and over-police. This is really my opinion of a broad package. And then within that, a broader sort of infrastructure package, which would include our plans on community policing, we can include parole questions on decertifications. Those should be line items in larger packages. The fact that that's all our legislature is talking about, in my opinion, is pathetic. Like I said, it's an eyedropper on a massive problem. And it's basically the MO of what we have in California. Every problem we have, homelessness, housing, schools, crime, fire, water, everything the government does is an eyedropper to massive problems. And it's no surprise nothing changes.
Let me ask you about COVID. It's according to that PPIC poll, it is the number one issue. And obviously everyone's dealing with it in one way or another. And I'm wondering, what would you do different from what Governor Newsom is doing now on the pandemic in terms of masks, vaccines, anything?
We need a three-pronged approach to handle COVID. Number one, we need better masking. N95 masking is a priority over just facial coverings. We know those are statistically much better for the wearer and the other person.
Who pays for that? The government pays for that?
For people who can't afford it, I'm accepting of the government distributing N95s to folks who cannot afford them. Yes, that is okay. I also know that we do not have a push for HEPA filtration and ventilation right now, which I think is a crime. I think our three-pronged approach needs to be indoor ventilation and HEPA filtration, just like planes have. Why is it we go into a restaurant, there's not a HEPA filter to be found anywhere? No surprise, COVID cloud spread. It's ridiculous. You can't just rely on masks because people take their masks off when they eat. So you need filtration. You can't just rely on vaccines because people with vaccines, according to the University of Oxford, are still spreading the Delta variant. So you've got to have a three-pronged approach indoors: masks, vaccinations, and filtration.
So on your YouTube page, you are running, as you've told us, as a JFK-style Democrat. Yet on your YouTube page, you put out shout-outs to the Epoch Times, influential right-wing media outlet. You give another shout-out to Ben Shapiro, who's a former editor of the right-wing Breitbart News. He supports a total ban on abortion, was a big Trump supporter. Why are you giving him a big shout-out? And what message do you think this run brings to voters? If you're running as a Democrat, yet giving shout outs to these conservative media organizations?
Well, I think it's worth mentioning that references are different from shout outs. So a shout out would be like, hey, go check out my buddy Ben or something like that. That's not what I'm doing. What you have in an intro reel to my introduction of my plan, it's a 53-minute video, is a clip of Ben Shapiro decrying how horrible homelessness is in California. And it was one of the reasons he left California. Now, a lot of Californians might be happy he left, but the point is, he is correct. Homelessness is a disaster in California. It doesn't matter who says it. The fact is, California has become an embarrassment when it comes to homelessness. And so that's the kind of reference that you're referring to. I wouldn't, as an influencer, I wouldn't call it a shout out, but hey, I don't want to mince words either. Yeah, he appears in the video as complaining about homelessness. And I agree with him. I think homelessness is horrible, but that doesn't mean that I agree with his other.
But it does say on your on the page, shout out, right? And I mean that's the word you use. Shout out to Epoch Times, shout out to Ben Shapiro. And, I don't see that balanced. I mean, if you're a Democrat wondering who to vote for and, they see that you're, pretty closely, I don't know how to say aligned, but you're referencing a group that the New York Times calls a Falun Gong-backed newspaper that uses aggressive tactics, right-wing misinformation to create a pro-Trump media empire. I mean, why would that be appealing to a Democrat?
Well, yeah, thank you for that. Well, first of all, thank you for enlightening
welcome.
me. I think you must be maybe referring to the description because it's not in the video, and you might be right. I will make sure that's changed. So thank you for that. That's certainly not the intention. So now regarding the Epoch Times, look, here's the thing: the Epoch Times was one of the first media organizations that reached out to us for an in-person interview when I announced my campaign. We asked them. We said, hey, look, When folks look up the Epoch Times, they see some pretty critical descriptions of the Epoch Times, and they assured us. They said, "Look, we know this exists. That's not who we are. The point, though, regardless, is we just want to sit down with you and give you an opportunity to share your message to our voters, because there are people in California who watch our content and who are voters in California. And if I'm going to run to be the governor of California, then I need to do two things. One, I need to admit mistakes where they are. And you got me on the shout out issue, so we'll get that taken care of. I agree with you. Probably in hindsight, we shouldn't have had them in the video, but that's the past now. Number two, regarding the Epoch Times, look, if I'm going to be the governor of the people, I need to represent everyone. And so I don't really care if Fox Business reaches out or CNN reaches out or y'all reach out. I'm willing to talk to anyone with an audience because I believe the problems we have in California are problems that everybody can agree with solving together.
So you have said that any candidate is better than Newsom, but you also said Larry Elder wouldn't be better. Elder is, of course, leading all the other replacement candidates, including you, in the polls. So, how do you square your statements on that? Obviously, you'd vote for yourself, but I mean, Newsom and Elder are on far sides of the political spectrum. Where do you come down on that?
Yeah, so I still believe that any candidate is better than Newsom, in my opinion. And I have a full list of his failures outlined at meetkevin.com. And the reason I say that is because 2022 is right around the corner. If we end up with Elder for a year, I don't believe he's going to get anything done. I think his appointments are going to get sandbagged. His executive action is going to get overturned. And his vetoes are going to get overturned. So I don't believe he's going to get anything done with a 75% supermajority in the legislature. We've never had this large of a supermajority. Not during Schwarzenegger, not during other Republicans, never. It's a very, very powerful supermajority. So the reason I say the legislature running California might be better is because Gavin Newsom has misled us. Surplus, rent relief, fire prevention, water prevention, housing crisis, the mismanagement of cannabis, you name it.
Yeah, we're short on time, so I apologize for jumping in. But real quick, so you are saying it sounds like that Larry Elder would be better than Gavin Newsom. Just real quick, because we're short on time. Just so I understand.
Yes, because it would give us an opportunity to replace him.
All right. Kevin Paffrath, thank you so much. Appreciate your joining us. That'll do it for this edition of Political Breakdown, a production of KQED Public Radio.
Our engineer today is Katie McMurrin. KQED's team includes Holly Kernan, Ethan Toven-Lindsay, Julia Chan, Otis Taylor, and Erica Aguilar. I'm Katie Orr. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at @1KatieOrr.
And I'm Scott Schaefer. You can see what I'm up to on Twitter. I'm at Scott Schaefer. Thanks for listening, and do not forget to vote.